Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. What if losing your job twice was the best thing that ever happened to you? In this episode, Nick LeRoy shares how layoffs pushed him to build a personal brand, a thriving consulting practice, and even launch a job board, all without a master plan. We talk about why side hustles are training wheels, why he refuses to gate content, and how doing uncomfortable things can keep you relevant. If you've ever wondered whether the leap to solopreneurship is worth it, this one's going to hit home. I will see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest is an SEO mastermind who turned layoff frustration into entrepreneurial freedom, building his own lane in a crowded industry and helping big brands navigate a digital world that changes faster than Google can update its algorithm. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I'm excited for our conversation. And if you know, as most people will know now, I like to dive right in. So now, when we chatted, you mentioned that after being laid off, you sort of went through this frustrating phase of job interviews, and something just clicked for you, right, during that time. So can you take us back to that moment when you decided to go out on your own instead of, continuing your job hunt?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll even do one step before that. So unfortunately, I've lost my job twice and had two completely different experiences. The first time I lost my role unexpectedly, but I was able to tap my network and I literally was able to get in a new job within like 3 weeks. So that worked out really, really well. And I feel like that doesn't happen for most people. And that just shows like power of your network. However, so once for anybody who's been let go, laid off, fired, whatever term you want to do, you'll know what I'm talking about. You just never look at employment the same. Like job security has a completely different ring. So with the second time, I lost my job because of COVID-19. We ended up losing a bunch of business. It had a big impact to the bottom line of the company I worked at, and my team was let go. And then ultimately, I had 30 days to kind of wrap up the SEO offering. So with that
Wow.
being said, it was 30 days, and I, was tapping my network, jumping on some interviews, and it just felt like a lot of work. And I just was never 100% into it. Like I was saying all the right things, I was showing excitement, but I felt kind of dead inside. And it got to the point where I had one opportunity with a big enterprise brand. It was going to be my first opportunity working in-house. And I went through maybe 4 or 5 interviews. And then at the end, like I was already exhausted, but they called me and they said, "Oh, we went with somebody else." And I was like, shoot, like this sucks. But do me a favor, like, what can I do better? Like, what's some feedback? And when their response was, and I'm not kidding you, we don't release that information to applicants, I feel like I just completely died inside. It was just like, I'm done. I can't do this. Like, I need to go out on my own. And as we had talked about before, I had told my wife, I was like, I need to go out on my own for 2 reasons. One, I will find success and it will allow me to have that control over my career, my growth, my calendar, all the benefits of traditional, freelance or independent life. But on the flip side, if I were to fail, I thought that it would put me in a better position to be a good employee again because I've tried it. It didn't work out well and would maybe allow me to be more appreciative of the traditional 9 to 5 role.
Yeah, no. What's funny is as you were going through that, what struck me is the job market has become even worse now because I have a friend who's looking for work and he's been through like 10, 12 rounds and then they ghost you. So it's
Right.
you don't even hear back anymore. Of course I'm going to date myself, but when I used to apply for jobs back in 20 years ago, you would ask for feedback and you would actually get that. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I
No,
can't even imagine. Yeah.
It's crazy to think about that, because if you had asked me after that call, like, can interviews get worse? I would have said no, but you're right. I mean,
Yeah.
at least at that point, it felt like normal. I mean, nobody appreciates getting that standard email that's like, thanks, but no thanks. But at least
No.
it was a follow up and kind of gave you permission to keep moving forward. So, yeah, I think we're in a really, really weird spot. And I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point in time. But I have firsthand experience, seeing, at least in the SEO space, running SEOjobs.com. I see a lot of people coming to the site, and the demand is just nowhere near where the supply is right now. And that's probably a first for this industry ever. And I think it's more broad just within technology. So it's a rough time for trying to find a job.
Yeah, and the macro uncertainty doesn't help either. But again, that's maybe for another podcast. So the other thing you mentioned to me was that you had a side hustle while you were still working, but it was to spoil your kids, right? So it wasn't sort of a planned thing. But I guess I want to know, how did that mentally prepare you, or what it did? How did it not prepare you? So did it end up being a boon or a bane?
It was absolutely one of the best things I've accidentally done. Similar with, I think I had told you as well, like building my personal brand.
Yeah.
I literally, like with SEO, I was so excited since day one. I graduated from college, got this job that was only going to pay me $18 an hour. I didn't have any money. I remember my girlfriend at the time, like we went to Barnes and Noble and I found a like how to do SEO for dummies book. And I read it right then and there because I didn't have the money to be able to buy it. So fast forward a couple years when I started building some confidence, I'm still just as passionate about the industry. And the opportunity to freelance provided me two opportunities. One, it gave me the opportunity to own like an entire relationship and work with other technology and niches that I hadn't worked at kind of my 9 to 5 job. And then what I had mentioned to you is, I've got 3 kids, and at the time they were tiny, and I love nothing more than spoiling them to death. So refusing to ever accept, side hustle money as anything that's going to be consistent or constant, it was kind of nice to be able to have the 9 to 5, pay the bills, keep you afloat. But then, like anything else you could make on the side was going to the movies, buying a little toy, maybe going on vacation. And I think it's that mindset of being able to do a little bit extra and also owning some of those more business aspects in addition to delivering the service. It set me up incredibly for going out on my own. And I had no clue at the time. It just felt like great, $1,000 a month. Like, this is great.
Yeah, no, I love that. And actually, the concept, I think of it as sort of like training wheels, right? Because nobody's really, you don't really know what solopreneurship is until you take the leap, right? So I
Um,
always tell young people, go work for somebody first, because that
mhm.
typically will teach you how you don't want to be, or how you don't want to run a company. Forget about what you want to do. But and also, I think I say go get a side hustle, because that at least gets you, like you said, you build those muscles which you cannot or do not build in the corporate world, really. So I love that, the way you described it.
Absolutely. And I'd say, just in addition to it, you know, I always worked agency side, so I kind of had a
Yeah.
really good opportunity working with different people, different industries. But if you haven't had that opportunity, there's something about just interacting with other people. Like when you start impacting people's money or bottom line, they're not going to be kind. So they will call you out if you don't do good work. And sometimes they will call you out if you do bad work or good work. So, it's just really an opportunity. And there's so many things that people don't talk about for running a business, whether it be, solopreneur or, bigger. And it really is just, I keep telling people, it's get as many bats as you can. It's like you're going to strike out sometimes, but if you can do it when it doesn't really matter, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and also learn on somebody else's dime, right? So
Exactly. Yep.
it's a
Absolutely.
win-win. Yeah. So the
100% agree.
and the other thing which is interesting to me is, so you now built a career specializing in enterprise SEO, right? Now most solopreneurs might find that intimidating, because typically, they would go after either other solo consultants or small business market? What gave you the confidence to target large companies?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I've been asked that one before. I think honestly, it probably comes down to the agency work that I had previous to going out on my own. Actually, two of the agencies that had let me go had serviced enterprise clients almost exclusively. So I just had built those reps, those at bats that we talk about. And it was everything from being able to communicate, to get buy-in, execution, reporting on some of the largest scales. So I
Yeah.
wasn't really intimidated by enterprise. At first, it's just simply, how do I get enterprise to talk to just me? Like, that's a whole nother hurdle. But I was very fortunate. Again, we talk about, shortcuts to being able to succeed. And that was definitely, to your point, one of the benefits of working for someone else, because I kind of, grew up, if you will, in my agency career working with really large websites and notable brands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, and plus you had the training wheels, right? So you had managed relationships also independently of your corporate master, if you like.
Yep.
Because yeah, it definitely struck me because most people don't typically go after large enterprise, but I think that's interesting in terms of having those muscles to do it. So the other thing which I think was interesting, you just mentioned a minute ago, was you told your wife you either wanted to go solo and fail or become a better employee, right?
Yep.
So let me ask you then, in 5 years of doing this now, what has going solo or being solo sort of taught you about how you actually want to work?
It's made me feel 100% confident that I'm not employable anymore. And what I mean by that, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of people will agree that have been kind of similar to us, is I have always been direct, and I like giving feedback, and I like just not sugarcoating things. And I will say, because this is a really critical component, like, there's a way to do that without being disrespectful. Like, there's a component of being direct and really focused on getting stuff done. And clients really appreciate that. You know who doesn't appreciate that? When you work for somebody else. Because when you are direct, when you have that type of experience, there's the benefit of it when it works out well. But the alternative normally is catastrophic, as in you're not going to get renewed or they're not going to pay. So yeah, it's just, it was really interesting to go about that. And I think that's really one of my biggest learnings, is just everything has natural consequences, but I no longer have to worry about, oh, I can't say that, or I shouldn't say that, or I need to upsell this, or, Bobby's not going to like this, Joanne's going to give me a bad review. Like, those are all things that I just don't have to consider. Now it comes down to like two things essentially. One, am I telling the truth? Like, that's a big thing for me. I need to go to sleep and sleep well every night. So I'm big on, doing the right thing. And two, can I afford to lose this client? Because it's like, again, sometimes the truth isn't nice. And while I've been fortunate enough to win a lot of business and have clients that worked really well, I've had it work on the other way where it's like, hey, I guess we figured out we're not really cut out to do everything that, we thought we wanted to. And that requires not working with you anymore.
Yeah, no, I love that point because actually that's one of the things I always said when I was an independent consultant, I loved was the freedom of not being, I always tell clients what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, right? And that you cannot do in a corporation because it's always, like you said, you got to worry about the politics, you've got to worry about the implications, or like you said, it's like, well, don't tell them that because they might get upset and they might go to the other agency, right? So I know there is that sense of freedom you get when you go out on your own to do that. And I completely agree. And putting your head on that pillow at night feels really good.
Absolutely. And what's interesting to your point is you can actually kind of lean into that, like, honesty and being able to sidestep corporate politics. And that can actually be one of the things that helps you get along well with like internal teams. There's not an internal team in the world that ever wants to be told we're bringing an external partner to essentially tell you what to do. So
Right.
what I do is literally the first thing that I tell internal teams when I'm supporting them is, one, I don't want your job. Like, I'm not coming to get you. And then two, it's like, we've all been in that situation where you're advocating for something, you're saying something, and it doesn't seem like your bosses are listening to you. And then some fancy consultant comes in, says the exact same thing, and then they go, oh
Right.
my gosh, like, what's going on? So I tell people, it's like, use me as a way to amplify your voice. Because for me, and I have a little bit of a unique approach, like, I don't need the attaboys. I don't need the, Nick, you're doing great. I need to get paid at the end of the month. Like, that's my validation.
Right.
And what you end up doing is, if you can lift up your partners internally or even external partners, there is never a time where they're going to like let go of a partner without talking to those direct in-house roles. And if you can have them be your biggest advocates, like, everything has to go wrong for you to get cut. So I realize that that's kind of a long tangent, but that really is a huge unlock in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a really good point because, you, like you said, you're there to get the best outcome for them, not to climb the ladder, not
Right.
to please anybody, right? Or to, as like you said, or tell Wendy that she was right and this one was wrong. Yeah, I agree, and it's a shame that it. Well, I guess it's human nature, right? Somebody once told me is like, oh, I'm sure in the nonprofit world there's no politics, and I'm like, trust me, wherever there are human beings, there is politics. It's just part of human nature.
I
It's
love
just
the
the way we are.
nonprofit world. Everybody is title rich, cash poor.
Yeah, I know. They mean well.
Yep.
So, yeah. So now, before going solo, you'd already built industry connections, right? You mentioned network a few minutes ago, in what you call sort of goodwill through your involvement in the SEO community. So, let me ask you: was that intentional network building, and also how has it paid off in your business?
Yeah. So it definitely was unintentional to start with. And then when I wanted to be intentional, I was very fortunate to have an established network of connections. And what I mean by this is, I kind of alluded to earlier, I was very fortunate and I consider myself a small percentage of somebody who really loves what I do. So I'm passionate about it. What I do for my career is also kind of a hobby. So I'm always looking for an opportunity to get bigger, better, stronger, however you will. And what that looked like early on in my career while I was working for other people was just being an active voice in the industry. So for the SEO or search industry as a whole, previously, like, everybody was active on Twitter and there used to be some message boards. Like, it's just a lot of communication because, for anybody that doesn't know here, the algorithm for how you rank in natural search or the free search is completely proprietary. So anybody that tells you they know how it is, they have a connection at Google, they're lying. Nobody knows how to do it. A lot of us have just done it so many times that, after you do something 100 times, you kind of know that works, it provides value, or no, it doesn't. So that industry really just allowed for really good fodder, communication, debates, everything that was good. And because I was so active and wanting to learn, I just kind of found myself a part of that. And then it turned into building enough confidence where it's like, I think I kind of do cool stuff too. Let me share. And that went to, writing on some popular, search blogs. And then, I'd go to some conferences and, it's like, before you know it, it's like you're shaking lots of hands and you're smiling and high-fiving, send those LinkedIn requests. And literally, like I said, without even trying, it was like, I had a pretty good network. So the biggest tip for what I always tell people, and I'm sure you do as well, Nikhil, is just telling people, build that network out, because when you go out on your own, that is what kind of helps you thrive. And the reason that I said at the very beginning that I accidentally started it and then intentionally did was because of that. When I was looking for that job and telling you all that, I guess I'm not
A few
employable
weeks.
anymore,
Yeah.
what I was able to do is, I had many, many people that run agencies who were high up executives within the marketing team that were just in my network. And I was able to send emails, and it wasn't to beg for work necessarily. It's just like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like, I have no clue if this is going to succeed, but I'm super excited. A, can you give me any tips? Like, I'm soaking everything up like a sponge. And B, like, if you hear of anything, like, will you consider throwing my name into it? And it just turns into some referrals. And, before you know it, it's like you start working. And then I would say, at least my experience, being a solopreneur, is the rich absolutely get richer. Once you get that one nice logo, then somebody else sees it and they're willing to work. And then when you get two, it's easier to get three. And you have one that is a regular referral or, willing to be a testimonial. It just helps you get to the next one. And I would say that's especially true with enterprise clients.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's an old Japanese concept. I probably mispronounced it, but called kiritsu, I think, where it's first among equals. So it's like you're known by the company you keep, right? So once Goldman sees the logo, then Citibank's interested, and blah blah blah. Because like if you're doing it for them, then what are they doing that they want to know? But you're right, and I love. And somebody a lot smarter than me, I think, said that your network is your net worth, right? And I totally agree with that. I mean, like you're a testament to that. And I think, anyone looking to go solo should remember that is your safety net, is your network, right? And so I'm a huge
100%.
proponent of that. Yeah. And building your network. But again, doing it genuinely, right? Not going gold digging. You're not going there to like sell your wares and take everybody's money. You're doing it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not about hacking your way to a Lamborghini. It's about like, even when you're working 9 to 5, or again, I came agency side, it was very natural for me to send LinkedIn requests to my points of contacts and leaders across the companies. So again, not that I was going to go after any of my old agency's clients, but these are all people that leave and become leaders somewhere else. And then they remember Nick did some good work for me. Oh my gosh, he's by himself now. Like, I should chat with him. So it doesn't have to be, I'm going to network with you because I want your business. Like, that would be perfect if that's how it works. But the reality is you have to build that relationship. You have to date before you get married.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to do it with an open heart, right? You're not looking to solicit something. But no, I totally agree. Now, the other thing which I think is really interesting is a lot of solopreneurs I talk to, want to give back. Now, you created SEOjobs.com. We'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But what they struggle with is the dilemma of giving away stuff versus charging for their expertise. So how do you decide what to offer for free versus what to monetize?
So I will say the caveat to this answer is I don't consider myself a good salesperson. I tend to get a lot of my business by being authentic and helping people. And then people want to support people that they like and see value from. So with that, my direct answer is I don't gate much. In fact, like, I tend to just provide it, because I find that anytime I try to draw a line in the sand of like, this I'll do for free, but not this, it doesn't come off authentic for me. So for instance, it's like I take a bunch of calls with people that are, SEO consultants for an in-house team or an agency, and they want to go freelance. It's like, I just give back to a couple of those calls because I didn't have that much when I started. It's like I didn't have a go-to person that was doing exactly what I wanted. So it makes me feel good. And it kind of goes back to, I'm a big, big fan of the idea of like just doing good things. And it may not reward you immediately, but it will come full circle. And I would say that it works just as much in the business world as it does in like your personal life. So my take is give and then give more, because I'm a heck of a lot better at that than I am trying to create some ad campaign to get people to click, and come to my site and convert. Especially for my clients too. Like, I'm not working with companies that, small mom and pop businesses that are, $500 a month. These are businesses that are investing, high 5 and 6 figure annually into their search performance.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's really good advice too, because you're right. If you try and sort of sit down and draw a line between what you can, what you can't, it's always going to be very difficult to be authentic, right? And I always had a saying when I had my last company, which is like, you help people because you can, not because you want anything in return. And I think that's the philosophy you just espoused, right? And I think that is the best sales tool because you're planting seeds
Yep.
by giving back, right?
Well,
So
and
I
that's the
completely
whole
agree.
basis for my consulting gig. I know you and I had talked a little bit before. I mean, I basically, all of my leads come either from my newsletter or somebody who is referring it to me. And the newsletter, I'll just kind of go into that real quick. I've been writing the SEO for Lunch newsletter for over 8 years now, one email a week. And the thing that's funny, and I've only shared this with a couple people, is the way that it started was I had a client once when I was agency side, and she was so brutally honest. She came to me and she's like, and she's the boss. Like, she gets final say on everything. She's the person you want to prove on it. And she pulled me into her office when I was on site once and just goes, Nick, I don't know SEO. And I don't really see myself being able to learn it. She goes, but I need to know how I can support you. And more importantly, if I know what I'm paying for is getting value. So what I started doing was I started curating just select links like that were being published either from Google, an algorithm update or, you know, a search feature change, something that was just like high level. It's like not something that, the dorks like me want to know every detail, but every week it's like it's under 3 links with like 2 lines that just be like, why this matters. And then it turned into, well, this is really good for me. Like, this is going to hold me accountable. I have to do it, until it got to the point where it's like, well, now I'm sending these to a lot of my clients and a couple friends on the side. So I started just sending it out to everybody. And now it's like SEO for Lunch is, official search updates. So anything that comes directly from Bing, Google, and I've even been going into the AI side. I give a personal tip based off of like search careers, how to, go further along in it, and even SEO, job opportunities. Like you said, the market's kind of shitty right now, but when there are good opportunities, it's like I want to make sure that they're put out there. And again, I'm, speaking kind of a lot now, so apologies, but between that newsletter and then SEOjobs.com, which is just a platform for search professionals to find SEO specific gigs because we're such a small niche within marketing. If you go to Indeed or ZipRecruiters, type in SEO, you just get the worst user experience ever. And Nikhil and I, we were kind of joking about this because I guarantee if you go right now and type in SEO, one of the first roles is going to be like JavaScript developer. You'll scroll down 3/4 of the way and there'll be a bullet that says like SEO knowledge would be nice, but optional. And that's just because the Indeeds and the LinkedIns, ZipRecruiters, all those, like, they're trying to service everybody. So what I
Yeah.
created was a location, we say it's SEO jobs built by an SEO. It's like somebody who gets it. So when you go there, it's not going to be millions of jobs like you go on Indeed, but everything is relevant. Now it's just, do you have that seniority? Do you have this, location dependent? And between those two things, giving, again, it's just come full circle, as in I'm getting a lot of goodwill. I'm helping educate people through that newsletter. And then for SEO jobs, it's like, I remember losing my job. I remember panicking, looking online and just being like, where are these jobs? How do I talk to people? And it's like, there had to be something better. So when I had that opportunity to build that, now people have a home and kind of a default location to go to first in their journey. And that's what I hear a lot from people. And if I can make some money on it, great. But more importantly, if I can help just 1 or 2 people avoid the fear and the, how I felt when I was looking for a job, that's worth it right there.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a brilliant lesson in there too, Nick, which is that a lot of people want to start a newsletter and they do. But what I notice is most of the newsletters are talking about themselves. Here's the
Hmm.
latest news about me and my company. It's like, but that's not what, think of the amount of clutter there is in our inboxes today, right? So I
Yep,
love that you looked at it like, how can I provide some value to the person that I'm sending this news to, that will, that the information will be of use to them. And obviously you're promoting your expertise by doing that, but you're doing
exactly.
it in a way that, that is not just sort of like tom-tomming stuff about your company or things that you've done lately, which find a lot of newsletters tend to do. So
And
yeah,
one thing
I
that's
love how you
really
did
nice
that. And also
about
you started organically, right? Yeah.
Nikhil, one thing I just wanted to layer onto that was the benefit of when you have a newsletter that is consistent, for instance, mine is weekly, you have an opportunity of being visible on a weekly basis. As a solopreneur, it doesn't often take that many clients to book up, and then you don't have any resources. And it is phenomenal when things work like that because you're busy, you're doing good work, you're getting paid. But the problem is you then are waiting for turnover before you start marketing yourself again. And that's just like building your network, the worst time to try to go out and get new clients. So one of the benefits to giving back selfishly through something like the newsletter is being able to make your name relevant and visible, frequently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, by providing value, right? That's the best way to do it. Like you said, it's sales is not sales. Sales is providing value. That's what the real secret of sales, I think, is how can I help you, or how am I helping you? And that's when people remember you and they refer you and they want to work with you. So
Without a
no, I
doubt.
totally agree, and I think that's a great lesson. So, Nick, you had talked earlier about building your personal brand. Can you tell me a little bit of how it's evolved over the last 5 years, and sort of what's changed about how you present yourself?
Yeah, I would say when I very first started, it was just being present, as I had kind of mentioned before. It wasn't intentional. It was probably really overly authentic at the time because I just said what I thought and that was about it. And I would say now I try to be just a little bit more intentional. Again, authenticity is everything to me. So I try to always provide answers and value like I normally would, but I'm just considerate of how things might come off or, if there's a better way or a better analogy. And again, it's less about like politics and trying to appease everybody, but at the same time, when you take the contrarian point of view that I typically do, you don't want to alienate people just because you said something wrong or used a weird analogy. So again, authenticity first, but just trying to be, critical thinking about, being smart, what you're saying and how you're saying it.
Yeah, no, and again, it's a muscle you build over time too, right? You sort of become more conscious of yourself. And I always say the most fun thing about being a solopreneur or being on your own is that you are the brand, right? So everything you say and do, you're not shepherding this entity that lives in its own right, like an IBM or a Google. Everything you do and say contributes to that. So, building on that question, how do you differentiate yourself with other SEO consultants in the space? Because it's a pretty crowded space, right?
It is. And I would say I am less concerned about separating myself from other individual consultants because there are other people that do good work and I'm really happy for them. I think then it just comes down to personality and experience and, what type of clients you've worked with. And that's kind of how you go against other individual consultants. Where I would say the biggest opportunity for differentiation is when I'm going up against agencies. So a lot of people know the key for agencies to be successful, to generate profit, is the ability to, sell the vision, sell the strategy, but then once you sign that contract, to be able to resource it with a little bit more junior or affordable resources. That just allows them to be profitable. It's not meaning that they're always doing bad work. That's just how, that market works. So when I'm talking to clients that I know are working with agencies or have previously worked with an agency and are considering an independent consultant, I lean heavily into that. I say, hey, I'm not always the cheapest, but I don't work with a zillion people at once. And when you work with me, it's everything from the kickoff meeting to collecting the invoice. You're going to see me. So hopefully you like my pretty face.
Yeah, and there's no outsourcing, and there's no I know there's a lot of bait and switch with agencies, right? It's like, hey, we got the A team for the pitch, and now you get the this team for the actual work who you've never seen before. I know, yeah, and also going back to your earlier point, you can tell them what they need to hear, right? That I think is another
Absolutely.
advantage too. So they're not just, you're not going to go and sort of go through the playbook of that they want to hear. So the other
Exactly.
thing that's very interesting to me, and we sort of maybe touched on this when we chatted, was the recent explosion of AI tools and the
Mhm.
constant narrative that's out there now that SEO is dead. I mean, I get maybe 2 or 3 people a week reaching out to me saying that, hey, SEO is gone, but are the LLMs pulling you up? So how do you position yourself as relevant and valuable when clients are hearing these contradictory messages now?
Yeah. So, I mean, without a doubt, like AI is cool. The technology, like I know there's a whole ethics component of it and we could have a whole nother conversation about, but the technology is
Yeah.
pretty darn interesting and they're doing some really cool work. If I'm being completely honest, if you had asked me 3, 4 months, towards the beginning of the year, I kind of had a negative attitude. I was like, wow, is this the first time I'm doubting whether my skill set or career will exist in, 5 years? And I have since like been able to, unwrap it a little bit, go a little bit deeper and think about it. And what I'm telling people now is, and we saw this in real life with the content creation aspect of this, AI comes in, it's the shiny object. A lot of leaders see it as an opportunity to trim down budget because they think they're getting the same value. The reality is they do save that money, but they're getting like 30% of the value that they otherwise were normally getting. And similar to the content writers, we're going to see a world where people pull back from SEO. They're going to realize that AI by itself can't do it all. And then what's going to happen is they're going to realize that it's a tool that helps amplify smart and skilled individuals. So all that to being said, whether you are content writer, SEO specific, or probably any, you know, position that requires an online, presence, it being AI is a tool. If it's trying to be leveraged as a silver
Yeah.
bullet to get rich quick, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and great point. I mean, most people, I always tell people, tell AI what to do, don't ask AI what to do, because it's not going to solve all your problems, and it's not sort of the silver bullet that everyone, at least the people making it, are pitching it as the silver bullet. So, as a be all
Exactly.
catch all of everything. The other thing that's very interesting to me is that the industry is also full of hot takes, right? And every time I blink, there's a new shiny object. So how do you sort of avoid chasing the shiny thing and also discourage clients from doing it?
I think that's the $1 million question because it's hard. It's like you want to embrace new technology, opportunities, tools, because sometimes and many times it really does help scale and create better deliverables. What I try to do is just understand like what is the value that I'm going to be gaining potentially by this, and then I'm just kind of prioritizing based off of that. So if let's just say for instance it's writing title tags and I feel like we already have a really good solution and it kind of gives you, let's call it the 90% optimized solution, I'm not going to spend a lot of time focusing on a brand new tool that comes out that claims they can do that better. Now if we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on XYZ and a tool becomes available, I see that as a big opportunity for scale and then just efficiency. So from my perspective, I take a very analytical and, just like critical thinking perspective. And honestly, it's just kind of jump in, taste whatever you're trying to play with, and then make that assessment and get out.
So when business is flowing, it's easy to say yes to everything, right? But you've been at this a while. So can you talk a little bit about what you've learned about saying no?
Saying no is like a superpower, because what it ends up doing
Yeah.
is it allows you to be available for even better opportunities. And what I mean by that is, and I think this is where you're alluding to, is like when I first started out, I said yes to everything. And then I'd become crazy busy. And then something cool or a really good brand would pop up, and I couldn't take it because out of sheer necessity of sleeping and eating, I knew I wouldn't be able to give my best result. So now, no is allowing myself that opportunity and almost having the faith that a better opportunity will be coming. And, some people say, that's why you shouldn't say yes, or you shouldn't give on prices or scope. I tend to wait, and instead of like increasing my rates like consistently, if I am rotating out a client, that's when I will raise rates, and that's where I kind of relearn my word no. And again, long story short is when you start saying no, it kind of gives you more of the power, and then it provides more value, and people then kind of have to make that decision, like, do I want to work with Nick or no? It's like just something that you don't get in,
Yeah.
and no is something that you never get in a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, true. And you never have the option to say no, right, in a 9 to 5. But also, I think your take was interesting because a lot of times, it's also, I would say no because it's not the right fit. Because a lot of people are like, saying, oh, we'll just take anything that comes through the door because it's a paycheck. But you also sort of erode your expertise and your value if you're just saying yes to absolutely everything, right? But I love also what you just said, which is that you sort of you have to end up passing on really great opportunities if you've always got your cup all the way up to the brim, right? You, as a solopreneur, you sort of need to make sure you have a little bit of bandwidth too. So I think that's interesting.
Absolutely.
So many solopreneurs struggle with the feast or famine cycles, right? So how have you approached creating stability and predictability in your business?
For me, savings is everything, because I feel like the more secure you are, then you get to be more aggressive with the word no, which then leaves you only for the opportunities that are the strongest. And I was fortunate, I guess, if that's how you want to look at it. Like when I went out on my own, it was right when COVID had started. So I had 2 years of doing this, making money when everybody was shifting online, but I couldn't spend it because my family and we couldn't leave. Like that was, buying food, or getting pizza delivered was the exciting part of my day. So what I was able to do is take my earnings and stash it away. And it was great at the time because, you know what, I can't do anything. We're bored. Maybe we'll buy a new Netflix, subscription, but that was about as exciting as it got. But what that did is later on, when there was a time where things were a little bit slower, your gut instinct is to take anything. You're like, I gotta have money coming in. I gotta be able to pay the bills. Failure is not an option. But if you have 3, 6, 9, 12 months of savings, like then you can afford to have a little bit more faith. And as you had mentioned before, you're not going to take something that's a bad fit, because the last thing you want to do is sour your name. If you take a project and then you can't deliver, that makes you look bad, and that gets out in multiples more than any good work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of value in what you just said in terms of also having a cushion, right? Because the cycles are up and down. You can have pretty decent consistency like you've had, but there will always be lean times, right? So the moral of the story is don't go out and buy that yacht after having a great big year, right? Get the Netflix subscription or the DoorDash one instead and have a little bit of fun. But I agree. And yes, and your reputation is everything, right? So that is really important. And I know it's a tough decision because it's sometimes you're sitting there and saying, oh, do I pay bills next month or do I turn down this client, right? But you have to sort of find that balance. I agree.
100%.
So if we were to meet again 5 years from now, Nick, where would you want to be? What would you want to have achieved?
I think what I would want to achieve is more diversity in my revenue. Right now, I really enjoy consulting. I like working with my clients, but I'm still trading time for money. And that's great for now, but it's not what I want to be doing forever. I would love to be able to ramp up, say, SEOjobs.com to the point where it's, say, 50% of my income. And then I could supplement that with the other 50% being consulting. And I think that gives me the best of both worlds, but also allows me that diversification for if SEO does die, and I don't get any consulting gigs, maybe I can pivot the job board and that would allow me to have a source of income, or vice versa. If SEO jobs actually do die, then I'll pivot my services into something that's complementary and I can double down. But in 5 years, I would love to come back and say, one, I'm still doing this and I love it. And two, I just have figured out more opportunities to provide myself security. Because again, as somebody who has lost my job twice, I can never imagine a world where I'm relying on a single paycheck to take care of my family.
But what I will say is, I think diversification is very smart, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, but also think sort of ahead, right? In terms of having multiple revenue streams without obviously losing your core focus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't go off and say, I'm going to now make cola as an alternative, go down a rabbit hole. Figure out how you can turn your offering into, multiple types of ways to sort of generate revenue. So I love that. I think that's really good advice. So if you were to offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to start their solopreneur journey, Nick, what would you tell them?
Quality over everything. And I know that sounds really simple, but really what it comes down to is there's a lot of people in this world that'll promise you the world, but only a small subset can actually deliver it. So focus on over delivering, provide the most value you can, and within reason, do everything you can to make sure that people that are paying for you are happy. And honestly, everything from there is details. If you can provide the best services or product possible, all the other stuff will figure itself out.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome advice. And also, I think the other thing which comes through when I talk to you is the joy. You enjoy doing this, right? And I think that's really important too. It's overlooked that because if you hate doing this day in and day out, you can't do 90% of what you just talked about.
I love that
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, no, I love that you say that too, because that's something that now that I've been doing this for 5 years, I almost take for granted. Part of what I used to build what I have today was we all have experiences working for other people. Some of it really good, some of it I don't ever want to talk about again. And that shapes you into what your services are and how you work with people. If someone's going to talk poorly to me or take advantage of me or do something that I otherwise wouldn't appreciate, like, I'm not going to work with you. So those are the rules and the boundaries that you get to establish when you work for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And sounds like you found your ikigai, Nick. It's the what you're good at, what you can make money off of, and what brings you joy, right? So I think you definitely found that the dot between those circles. So let me ask you now, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
Again, I think the only other thing that I would add, we already talked about quality, but always try to level yourself up. I think one thing that people get really stuck in, and it's kind of going against what I just said, do what you love, take the best experiences and amplify them and avoid the ones that you didn't like. But there's a trap to being a solopreneur too, which is you don't want to do things that make you feel uncomfortable, but make yourself do it. I mean, you don't have a boss anymore that's going to say, I want to see you do this, this, and this, and then we'll give you a little shiny promotion at the end. Like that doesn't exist. So for me, I take it a little bit extreme. It's like when I'm going about my workday, if there's an opportunity and my gut is like, oh God, no, I don't want to do that. I'll answer myself like, why? And is it because it's like a bad fit or goes against my morals or doesn't fit fees or something like that? Like that's one thing. And I have no problem saying no. But if it's like, ooh, that makes me feel uncomfortable, I don't want to do it, then I make myself do it. Because again, there's nobody else to hold you accountable for that. And I think getting stuck in your ways is probably one of our biggest threats, because especially in something like SEO, it changes so frequently. I don't want to wake up and then realize that like I've missed out and I'm working on like 5 years ago strategies.
Yeah, no, I love that too because it's stagnation is sort of our death knell, right? As solopreneurs, and also I think there's inherently a joy in learning. I'm learning, building new muscles every week, every day, every month, right? And things that a year ago, if you'd asked me, or 3 months ago, if you'd asked me, I was like, oh, I wouldn't ever do that. And now I'm like, yeah, that's kind of interesting once you get into it. So, but again, yes, avoid rabbit holes, but yes, constantly update your skills and learn new things. And of course, in your industry, like I said up top, things change faster than Google can change the algorithm, right? So you really do need to
Yes,
stay on
sir.
top of stuff. Okay, so well, that brings us to our rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a couple of questions at you. Give us whatever comes to your mind. So, what's the strangest SEO myth you've ever had to debunk for a client?
I think the most common one that I think is still the one that throws me off the most. It's just if you pay for paid search ads, will that help your organic search? And the answer is no.
Well, you've put that to rest for a lot of people, so I think people will appreciate that. What's one thing you secretly love about being solo?
The full control. I don't like relying on
Um,
other people to succeed or pay my bills.
or to tell you what to learn or what not to learn. Yes. So, if you weren't an SEO consultant, what would you be doing instead?
I was just having this conversation with my wife, and this is going to be really, really weird, but I feel like I'd be a butcher. Like, I really enjoy smoking meat. And I was just talking to my wife about how if the internet ever dies, I'm going to have to figure out how to process animals because I feel like it's just intriguing to me.
It's so funny you should say that. We might be soulmates because I actually told my wife recently I want to do a butcher course. There's something fascinating about working with your hands. Yeah, so maybe your wife and my wife can commiserate together because she looked at me like, what?
I like it. That's funny.
So, yeah. What's the most overrated SEO tactic out there right now?
Well, let's see. Probably just creating content for the sake of saying that you have content. Like, yes, content is really important. Yes, you should have a blog, but there needs to be strategy. There has to be intentionality behind it. It isn't a correlation of words exist on my site, therefore my SEO is better. It's not that simple. And a lot of people in SEO, they sell it as that, as, we'll give you 4 blog posts a month with your SEO package. And that's not it.
Yeah, well, that's a good myth to bust, and I think you've saved a lot of people time and money as a result of sharing that. So my last one, what's a dad skill that's unexpectedly helped you in your business?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay. Again, I think leading by example. Like, again, I talk about being authentic. And I think that if there's anything that I want my kids to be able to say about me is that they're proud and they think that I'm a hard worker. And I want to continue to model that for my kids, but also like my peers in the industry, my clients. Not all projects work out at the end, but if I could have 100% success rate with anything, it's going to be like, yes, Nick cared. He did try his hardest. And if that's where I get to die one day, like with that checkbox, like from my kids and my family, first and foremost, clients on the other side, everything else almost doesn't matter.
Well, that's a lovely goal, and I can tell you your authenticity shines through, Nick. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and your journey with our listeners today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Nick's story reminds us that solopreneurship isn't always a bold leap. It's often a slow burn. He didn't wake up with a build my own thing blueprint. He just followed the friction, what wasn't working anymore, and used it to build something better. Here are my key takeaways. Side hustles build muscles. Nick's side hustle wasn't strategic, it was to spoil his kids. But the act of owning a client relationship, managing delivery, and navigating scope, that's the gym for future solopreneurs. If you're still in a 9 to 5, stop waiting for permission. Use your free time to train for the solo game. Generosity as a lead strategy. Nick doesn't gate his value. He helps freely and it pays off. Not in scarcity driven lead funnels, but in compounding goodwill and visibility. Solopreneurs, stop treating generosity and revenue like they're in conflict. If people trust your free stuff, they'll line up for the paid stuff. Enterprise isn't intimidating, it's just different. While most solopreneurs chase small businesses, Nick went straight for enterprise clients. His secret? He already had the reps from agency work. Don't automatically assume you need to start small. If your corporate experience gave you enterprise level skills, don't be afraid to use them. Saying no is a revenue strategy. Nick talked about how saying no gave him room to say yes to better fit clients. And here's the rub. If your cup is full of low value work, you'll never have the margin for the stuff that changes your career. Stop chasing every dollar. Start creating room for the right dollars. Build when you don't need the work. Nick's newsletter wasn't a growth hack. It was born from a client need. And yet it's become a visibility engine even when he's not actively looking for clients. Consistent, visible value beats loud, inconsistent selling, especially in this oversaturated, distracted world we live in. At the end of the day, Nick's path is a masterclass in unsexy consistency, quiet confidence, and choosing depth over flash. And in a world full of hot takes and shortcuts, that's what actually builds longevity and recurring revenue. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.